Forget what they told you in high school English class about academic writing. They taught you how to fail more than likely. But trust me, I will teach you everything you need to know, okay? Our instructor was an authoritative figure, but in the best way. I knew he'd give me the information I needed somehow. I felt incredible relief wash over me, not unlike the codeine I was using every day. Steve cracked open his can of Nestea, taking a swig. I had more confidence in him in those first 5 minutes than I ever did in my senior high school English teacher. Until she changed schools and got you as a teacher, my daughter always pulled in solid A's and B's in English class, Mom said to my teacher after seeing my report card in grade 11. I was proud of her for being as confrontational as that, in all honesty. I knew that was hard for her. I've been a teacher for a while. She doesn't have the potential for higher than a C in my class, he said sanctimoniously on his end of the line. Mom and I looked at each other in disbelief. I graduated with that C. I couldn't have chosen a more perfect first college instructor than Steve. I knew if I got a C, I would be given reasons why and how I could improve. This would never be necessary. I finished out that course with an A. I'd much rather be teaching intro English classes than being a lawyer. I did that until I got my head read, he said, which perked up my one-day husband's ears. What's wrong with being a lawyer? He asked. The constant working that kept me away from my family to please partners' expectations for billables, for starters, he said. So are you saying I shouldn't go to law school, Steve? I'm not telling you what to do, but I know it wasn't the career for me in the end, and I feel I can be of better use doing this. I just want a viable career so I can get out of the army, Cody said, adding, there's a real war on now. When class ended for the night, I asked where he worked. 741 Comm Squadron in Esquimalt, not a dockyard, though. I'm chief clerk at the little unit, he began, about to elaborate further, but I could stop him because my family had a military connection to the island. I knew where 741 was located. Yep, you're on Colville next to the Army Hospital. My mom worked in that building in the mid-70s after she finished high school. She was a secretary for the RCMP detachment there. Was she in the military? Nope, I said, laughing at the idea. The true military connection to the South Island is Mom's stepdad. He was posted to CFB Esquimalt in 1973 or thereabouts, after his tours of Germany and Cyprus in the late 60s. Ah, yes, back when the military had real posting seasons. They don't send you all over the world like that anymore, especially whole families. Now guys get sent to theater and family stays here. He smiled at our commonality. Mom never went to Cyprus, but she lived in Germany with her mom and sister on a couple different bases. She loved it there, and that's why I know about it. Weird. My mom's dad was in the army too, and they were posted to Germany at that same time. That's so crazy. You're going to theater, aren't you? I asked, hesitating, knowing Canada was about to send soldiers to Afghanistan. If I was Reg Force, I wouldn't have a choice, but I'm reserve, so it's voluntary, for now anyway. We edited each other's papers for the class. I wrote compare and contrast papers about Italian futurism and German Dadaism. He wrote process papers about army drill with glossaries longer than the body text. We were an unlikely pair, and yet there we were. I've never really gotten art and poetry and all that stuff, but I feel like I could see some and maybe not hate it after reading what you wrote, he said as I got on my bus one night. I got up to my room later. I was at the top of a retired lady's house just off Cook Street Village, the hippie part of Victoria. I had a big window facing the street, interestingly called Harbinger Avenue. The house was about 100 years old, as were most houses in that neighborhood. This was the area where Emily Carr, One of Western Canada's most beloved painters had lived and died. Carr House was a short walk from where I was living. I went to close the cafe curtains and saw something. The windows were original wavy glass and wooden sashings. They had gobs of paint on them. Someone at some point, however, had written the name Cody on the paint. They'd really scratched it into the paint, as there was texture to it when I felt it. I'd never noticed that before. "Hey, you're in my window, you know," I said. I pulled out my writing book and flipped to the Polaroid image I'd taken of the window, knowing he'd be awfully confused by the comment alone. "Whoa, that's extra weird," he said. "I knew I'd have to prove that one, so I took a photo of it. Aspiring lawyer guy," I said. And we smiled. At one point, I had to hand him a folder, but dropped it. I got up to retrieve it and hand it to him. Not wanting to be anything less than smooth, I did my best to make a joke out of it. I grabbed the folder and sarcastically fist-pumped my success. And for some reason, I decided to try being funny. I kept pumping both my arms as I stepped towards him and started to say the words, "Duffman is thrusting in the..." But I got self-conscious and lost the words as I did my best impression. "I believe you meant to say, Duffman is thrusting in the general direction of the problem. Right?" he said, sounding much more like that Simpsons character than I ever could. Then with wide eyes, he looked up at heaven and said, "God bless the Simpsons." Hey, I gotta ask, is it true that some people have silly nicknames in the military, or is that just Hollywood? "The guys sometimes call me Tex," he said. "Why? You're not American, right?" "No, I'm not American. Do you know that old Chuck Norris show?" "You mean Walker, Texas Ranger? That show?" "Yep, that's the one." I was still confused. "My last name is Walker," he added, winking. I expected better, but I know those names are rarely chosen, but rather bestowed. "My family all call me Radar," he went on. "You mean like Walter Radar O'Reilly from that show, MASH?" "Yep." "Why would they call you that?" "I have little silver glasses and I am an army clerk." "Are you a corporal like he was too?" "I'm a master corporal now. I just finished my JLC in Kingston." "That's higher up than corporal, right?" I didn't want to go making assumptions. "Yes. Next I'll be sergeant in a few years." This might be a dumb question, but you're wanting to be a lawyer and you're in the forces. So, shouldn't you go to a military institution for your legal education? "I've always wanted to be a lawyer since I took a law course in high school, before I dropped out anyways," he said, looking down. "So you went into the army," I said. "I don't think I'll be a legal officer. There's lots of competition for those jobs, and it would basically guarantee me a lifetime posting to Ottawa. I hated living there as a kid, and I really don't want to go back if I can avoid it." We were on a bus. English class was at night, ending late, and it was always dark. It was raining because it was the middle of winter. The drops, leaving their trails of gray dirt as they shimmied along the windows, foggy from breath, were sparkling more brightly with the light they caught from the signs for Scotiabank, Liquor Plus, or Travelers Inn. "Hey, wait a sec. Why are you on the bus?" I asked. "Mom and my uncle borrowed the car," he said. The bus pulled up to the Chapters on Douglas Street with its little Starbucks still open upstairs. "Hey, I've got a real hankering for a London fog tonight. Want to come with me?" "Sure, why not?" "Oh, wait. I'm sorry I asked that," I apologized, feeling guilty. "Why?" he asked. I just know you're trying to quit coffee, and I wouldn't want to encourage you to quit quitting. No worries there. I'll have herbal tea. It's not like I'm an alcoholic. You can relax. Okay, I won't worry. I just understand coffee is apparently ruining your life, I started, because I'd read his most recent paper for class, which detailed the digestive disorder he was potentially afflicted with, known by its acronym GERD. He followed me up the escalator, and we went to the Little Wee Starbucks. I found a table and we sat together. The store got quieter as the night passed by. So, why'd your family go on a trip? Were you not invited or something? I asked, teasing. No, nothing like that, he said. They went to my grandfather's funeral, is all. I immediately thought of my paternal grandfather, who I'd been close to. I imagined his death, getting lost in that possibility, that inevitability, and shuddering. It was like the sun warming my shoulders as I stood under one of the Bing cherry trees in Nono's yard, reaching up to pick those nearly black cherries, biting in and stripping the flesh from the pit with my tongue. Then that sunshine went away from a sudden cloud, realizing Nono would die one day too. I hated that feeling. I am so sorry for your loss. Why are you here? I asked, way more upset than he was. I wasn't close to him, he said, as I nodded along, still considering how my grandfather was a mere mortal too, but he wasn't allowed to die. Mum kept him at a distance, he said. He looked at his tea. I was studying his head shape and how his hair likely had a wave pattern if it were allowed to grow out of its military haircut. I imagined cutting that hair one day. I still had my clippers, combs, and shears from hairdressing school. I always cut my boyfriend's hair. He assaulted Mom repeatedly. Had sex with her, he added quietly, so I understood what kind of abuse we were talking about. Then I remembered my maternal family. I have another grandfather who's of a similar cloth, I guess you could say. My grandma's been married 4 times, so I have a collection of grandfathers. Really? Wow, that's a lot of marriages. Yeah, that family has its troubles, that's for sure. Grandpa, the sergeant, was an alcoholic who beat the family and even an officer or two, resulting in demotions and weekends in the tank. He sure wasn't great. But if it helps, I too have a history with the kind of thing your mom went through. Not with my dad, thank the good Lord, but nonetheless, I said, feeling like I said too much. I barely knew this person. I was telling him something I dreaded, but simultaneously, I didn't have the same feeling of my skin and muscles stripping away from my bones, looking to run away from guilt and shame, the way I normally did. He looked up at me through his dirty glasses, holding his mug. The store was closing. We better get out of here, I said, grabbing my soggy hat and coat, heading back out into the rain. See you next class, I said, getting on my bus as he got onto his, waving. At home, I got out my phone card and called my parents' house on the mainland. I had a habit of checking in on them about once a week with a proper phone call. I guess a lifetime of watching my dad do the same with his parents influenced me. Mum put her hand over the receiver to call for my sister to pick up in her room. You should talk to Allison. She's in a really bad way, Mum said. Allie picked up from her bedroom with the salmon pink carpet just down the hall from my old room at the top of those stairs. Matt's dead, she said, the words a cascade of grief and shock splintering through the landline. The extension clicked as Mum hung up her end. What are you talking about? He killed himself. She was in grade 12 that year. I never knew Matt, but I'd heard about him. He'd been suffering with guilt and shame for being gay. We went to a fine arts-oriented school. We were used to misfits of all sorts. Matt enjoyed being what we would have considered flamboyant in the late 1990s. He sometimes wore a long skirt and usually carried a purse despite presenting as male. This was enough for faculty to get involved. He started wearing darker clothes and not carrying the purse anymore. "It's not right," my sister said between gasps, her waking nightmare threatening to swallow her whole. She spoke until the automated voice came on to say I was out of time in 2 minutes. "I'm sorry about your friend, truly," I said. "Me too. Bye," she said before the click and dial tone. I remembered long-distance phone calls between me and my first boyfriend, how we often had to hang up knowing we had tears streaming down our faces. His mom would come on the line saying the equivalent of, "Get off the phone right now, this is so expensive," but in French. As much as I missed him, at least I knew I could see him again one day, which was a comfort I couldn't give my devastated sister. I remembered that boyfriend making the trip to our house in 2002, only a couple of months before I left. "She reminds me of you, but she's not you," he said about his girlfriend. "I always knew when a relationship was over. Every time, except with you." He was the other romantic relationship formed in a classroom before my family left Alberta, when I was still just a regular French immersion kid in grade 7, when life made sense, or so I thought. When sharing our first slow dance to End of the Road, that Boys to Men song, was all I needed to feel safe and loved. When shaking my head and listening to music to forget him didn't work, I did what I often did. I got a drink of pop and took my night meds, which were a couple prescriptions and recreational pain management. There was more pain than usual with all this death going on. The room got fuzzier and warmer, and I passed out with the lights on. I've been Danielle Walker. It's nice to see you.